start, eh?
Assalamu alaikum. Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar. Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar. Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah. Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah. Ashhadu anna Muhammadan Rasulullah. أشهد أن محمدا رسول الله. حي على الصلاة. حي على الصلاة. حي على الفلاح. حي على الفلاح. الله أكبر، الله أكبر. لا إله إلا الله.
إن الحمد لله نحمده ونستعينه ونستغفره ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا من سيئات أعمالنا ومن يهد الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلل فلا هادي له وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله يا أيها الذين آمنوا اتقوا الله حق تقاته ولا تموتن إلا وأنتم مسلمون يا أيها الناس اتقوا ربكم الذي خلقكم من نفس واحدة وخلق منها زوجها وبث منهما رجالا كثيرا ونساء واتقوا الله الذي تساءلون به والأرحام إن الله كان عليكم رقيبا يا أيها الذين آمنوا اتقوا الله وقولوا قولا سديدا يصلح لكم أعمالكم ويغفر لكم ذنوبكم ومن يطع الله ورسوله فقد فاز فوزا عظيما. أما بعد فإن أصدق الحديث كتاب الله أحسن الحديث هدي محمد صلى الله عليه وسلم وشر الأمور محدثاتها كل محدثة بدعة وكل بدعة ضلالة وكل ضلالة في النار. وقال تعالى في القرآن المجيد ولا تحنوا ولا تحزنوا وأنتم أعلون إن كنتم مؤمنين. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the Quran, so do not weaken and do not grieve, and you will be superior if you are true believers. In this ayah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has two prohibitions and then He has a promise. That Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells the believers not to weaken and not to grieve, and then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala promises that they will be superior, they will have victory, but based on a condition, in kuntum mu'minin, that you have to be believers. Right? That the victory is not unconditional. It's based on Iman. And just to contextualize this ayah comes in Surah Al-Imran. It was revealed after the Battle of Uhud. And the Battle of Uhud, I'm sure many of you know, was a battle in which the Muslims suffered great loss. Right? They suffered a great loss. Right? It was a military loss. Many Muslims, many Sahaba were killed. Many prominent Sahaba were killed, such as Hamza anhu, and even amongst the Shuhada, some of their bodies were mutilated. So it was a big loss for the Muslims, the Battle of Uhud. And yet Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells the Sahaba at this time, after the loss, do not weaken, do not grieve, and then He promises them, you will be, antum al-a'luna, that you will be superior, but on the condition, in kuntum mu'minin. You have to be believers. And this promise, of course, was for the Sahaba, but it's a promise for the believers until the end of time. And I want to focus on this ayah within the context of the current situation of the Ummah. The challenges that we face in terms of Islamophobia and persecution of Muslims. Just yesterday, there was the discussion of Bill 21 and its relationship to the Supreme Court. In a few days, we'll mark the 8th-year anniversary of the killing of our brothers in the Quebec City Mosque. 2 years after that, in 2019, there was the New Zealand Christchurch Mosque shooting. 2 years after that, again in 2021, the Assal family in London, Ontario was killed. 2023, the Yawadi al-Fayoumi, the young Palestinian boy in Chicago, was stabbed to death. And these are just some incidences, and there's many, right? And this is just within the context of hate crimes of Islamophobia within the Western world. But then if you look even further within the context of the Ummah globally, we all see Muslims being persecuted throughout the world, right? I mean, the most prominent example recently is the situation of our brothers and sisters in Gaza, that were facing genocide for the past 15 months within the backdrop of, persecution and oppression and killing that's been going on for decades. And which spilled over, of course, into Lebanon and then Syria. And then you have the Uyghur Muslims in China, you have the Rohingya Muslims in Burma, you have the Muslims of Kashmir, you have the Muslims of India, you have Sudan, and this goes on and on. And the thing is, when you look into this, it's very easy. It's very easy to feel this state of hopelessness, right? That, man, look, we're being killed everywhere, and just feel this sense of giving up. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us never to give up, right? And He promises us that the end will be for the believers, but we will be tested. We will be tested. And that's why in the Quran, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, أَحَسِبَ النَّاسُ أَن يُتْرَكُوا أَن يَقُولُوا آمَنَّا وَهُمْ لَا يُفْتَنُونَ وَلَقَدْ فَتَنَّا الَّذِينَ مِن قَبْلِهِمْ. There are two people think that they will be left to say that they believe, and yet they won't be tested. Verily we tested those before them. When we talk about Islamophobia and killing of Muslims, this is not something new. The nature of this dunya is it's a test. It's not paradise. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will test you if you say La ilaha illallah. Individually, but as a community, as a ummah. This is the nature of this world. And at the time of the Prophet ﷺ, I'll give you an interesting example of this. When the Muslims Sahaba were facing persecution in the Meccan period, and they were, at the height of their weakness and, being tortured, one of the Sahaba, Khabbab bin Arat, he was one of the Sahaba who would face the brunt of torture, to the extent that they would take hot iron rods and burn his back so that he would leave Islam. So he went to the Prophet ﷺ in this state, and he basically complained, that this is our situation. And the Prophet ﷺ told Khabbab that كان الرجل في من كان قبلكم يحفر له في الأرض فيجعل فيه فيجاء من شار فيدعو فوق رأسه فيشق باثنين فما يصده عن ذلك عن دينه. That he said, the Prophet ﷺ, how did he react to Khabbab's, telling him of his situation? He said, before you, meaning before the Sahaba, the nations before, there was a man who would be dug alive, but part of his body would stick out, and then they would take a saw and cut him in half while alive, to get him to leave Islam. Another man would have iron combs that they would peel his flesh while he's alive to get him to leave Islam, and they would not leave Islam. So one of the things the Prophet ﷺ is teaching Khabbab and the Sahaba is that believers have been tested throughout history. Right? If we think we're unique, right, in our times, we're not unique in that sense. We're maybe unique in the sense that our iman is weaker than perhaps previous generations, but we're being tested, and people before have been tested. At the time of the Prophet ﷺ, and even before. Right? So this is the nature of this world. Tests will come. And then the Prophet ﷺ said that by Allah, this affair will not be completed until the rider goes from Sana'a to Hadramaut, two places in Yemen, not fearing anybody except Allah, or a wolf that basically attacks his cattle. وَلَكِنَّكُمْ تَسْتَعْجِلُونَ, but you people are hasty. So then he's giving glad tidings to Khabbab that Islam will be victorious. This affair will be completed. And this is at a time where the Muslims have nothing. They have no power. They're just completely persecuted. And he's telling, no, Islam, to the extent that Yemen, people will not fear anybody except Allah. And of course, the matter did happen very shortly, after the Prophet passed away, even extended further, right, to the Persian Empire, to the Roman Empire, and it's still being completed in our time. Who would have thought that now, here in Canada, there are Muslims, and we're discussing Islam? The matter is still being completed. Islam is still extending. So we should never feel this sense of helplessness. And as the Prophet ﷺ said, "Ihris ala ma yanfa'uk wasta'in billah wa la ta'jaz." That seek greedily that which will benefit you. Seek the help of Allah and do not feel helpless. It's the command of the Prophet ﷺ, do not feel helpless. And as the ayah says, وَلَا تَحِنُوا وَلَا تَحْسِنُوا. Do not essentially weaken and do not feel grief. Does that mean not to feel sadness? That's what I'm saying. Saying don't give up. Don't give up. Continue doing what you are doing, and victory, the end will be for the believers. But again, the condition is Not that the question is, the end is for the person whose name is Ahmed or Zainab. The end is for the one who is a believer. You have to work on your iman. And inshallah, I'll expand on this in the second part of the khutbah. أقول قولي هذا استغفر لكم وأسأل المسلمين فاستغفروه إنه غفور رحيم. بسم الله والحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله. إنا لننصر رسلنا والذين آمنوا في الحياة الدنيا ويوم يقوم الأشهاد. Indeed, we will support their messengers and those who believe during the life of this world and on the day when the witnesses will stand. In this ayah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala promises that you will help the messengers and those who believe in this life and in the next. Now, one of the things is, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that He will help the messengers and those who believe, both in the life and the next. But when you look throughout history, there have been prophets who have been killed. You go through history, there have been believers who have been killed. So what is this nasr? One of the scholars mentions, as Ibn Kathir reports in his tafsir, that prophets and believers may be killed in this world, but their call will prevail in this world. Meaning, the prophets may be killed, the believers may be killed, the carriers of the message of Islam may be killed, but the message of Islam will never be killed. And the end will be for the message. You could kill the messenger, but you can't kill the message. Right? That's the nasr of Allah. And there are many examples of this throughout history. Many examples. And I'll just give you one very interesting one. At the time of the Mongol invasion of the Muslim lands, the Mongols, Genghis Khan, right? You look him up in history, and he is written in history as this very powerful, he created this powerful empire. This took over the world very fast, out of nowhere. And they also went to the Muslim lands, and they killed the Muslims. They ravished the Muslim lands. They destroyed the Muslims, to the point where there was Muslims who thought, this is the end of the world. This is the end. They thought that the Mongols were Ya'juj Ma'juj, the people who come at the end and who are basically the world. You can't face them and the world will end. They thought this is the end. And the Mongols, they entered into Baghdad, which is the capital of the Abbasid Khilafat. And they destroyed Baghdad. It says the oceans were filled with the blood of Muslims and also the inks of the books of the Muslims, because Baghdad was the center of civilization at that time. Now we think about maybe like America or China or whatever. At that time, it was Baghdad. The Mongols came and destroyed everything. They humiliated the last Khalifa of the Abbasid Khilafat. They put him in a rug and they trampled him to death. And this was the Mongols. But, very interesting, one of the grandsons of Genghis Khan, from the Mongols, Barke Khan, one day he was traveling and he came across a Muslim caravan in Bukhara, the same land in which Imam Bukhari was from several centuries earlier. So Barke Khan, he starts interacting and communicating with this Muslim caravan. And Barke Khan was so impressed by these Muslims, he ends up becoming Muslim. And many Mongols start becoming Muslim, to the point where Barke Khan and some of the Mongols end up fighting the other Mongols who are persecuting the Muslims. And as history will show it, that many Mongols end up entering into Islam. The very people that the Muslims thought this is the end of time, end up becoming Muslim. You see how the system of Allah works. It's very interesting, right? But the point is in this state of devastation, in this state where it seemed like there was no hope, there were still Muslims in that state who understood that there was two things they could not give up on, which is to practice their deen and to spread the message of Islam. Even in this situation. Imagine Barke Khan's coming, he's from the Mongols, he's asking this caravan, they can be like, this guy is the most evil person in the world, he's just trying to get information from us and we need to hide. No. They gave da'wah. And it changed the course of history. And we have a responsibility. We may not control the political situation of the ummah, but we do control how we practice our deen and how we spread the deen. So we should never be people who give up. We do what's in our capacity. And as the Prophet ﷺ says in a hadith, إِن قَامَتْ عَلَى أَحَدِكُمُ الْقِيَامَةِ وَفِي يَدِهِ فَصَّةٌ فَلْيَغْرِسْهَا. That if the day of judgment comes upon one of you, and one of you is holding a sapling, a seed, then let him plant it. Very amazing hadith. If the end is coming, and you're planting a seed, don't think, oh, the end is coming, what's the point? And you throw away the seed. Continue planting it. Continue planting it. Because what is in our control is the efforts. The results are not in our hands. We make the effort, and even if we don't see the results in this life, certainly you will see it in the next life. As Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, إِنَّ الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا وَالصَّالِحَاتِ إِنَّا لَا نُضِيعُ أَجْرَ مَنْ أَحْسَنَ عَمَلًا. That verily those who believe and do righteous actions, we will never let their reward go to waste. So we continue to do effort even if we don't see the tangible results. And we don't know. There's one, in the akhirah you'll see it for sure. But even in this life, you don't know. Like that person, that caravan, they were telling this Barqa Khan about Islam. They probably thought this guy's going to kill us. And he ends up becoming Muslim. Right? We don't know. Like, you could go do some small effort, some dawah effort, and you don't see any results. And maybe you pass away, and 4 or 5 generations, that small effort was linked to some other effort, and now some city in Northern West Territories is Muslim because of that effort. You don't know. Right? So you continue making effort, and you never ever give up. Believers never give up. Right? And I want to mention one other story in regards to the seerah, in regards to this idea of making effort and results. At the time of the Prophet ﷺ, in Amal Huzn, this is the year of sadness. This was one of the most difficult years for the Prophet ﷺ. His beloved wife Khadija anha passed away. Abu Talib had passed away. The persecution of the Meccans was at its height. So then the Prophet ﷺ, he decides he's going to go to Taif, the city of Taif, to give dawah. And he's hoping he's going to get support from them, they're going to accept Islam, etc. What happens, instead of them accepting Islam, they humiliate the Prophet ﷺ. To the extent that they're throwing stones at him and his sandals become bloody. They humiliate the Prophet ﷺ, they persecute him. This is the result, and he was in such a dire state already. But on his way back from Taif, he stops at a place called Nakhla, and it's nighttime. And imagine his feet are all bloody, and he's just tired and exhausted and humiliated. And what does he do? He pays Qiyamul Layl. What can you do? You pray to Allah. And as he's praying, he's reciting Quran. And when he finishes praying, as the Quran mentions, وَصَرَفْنَا إِلَيْكَ نَفْرًا مِنَ الْجِنِّ يَسْتَمِعُونَ الْقُرْآنَ. A group of jinn hear his recitation. And they're so fascinated, they become Muslim. And what's amazing about this story is, the Prophet ﷺ made effort in Taif. But the seed of dawah at that time, was it going to sprout in Taif at that time? It wasn't going to even sprout in the human realm, it was going to sprout in the jinn realm. Allah sent an unseen force to accept Islam. Absolutely amazing. We don't know where the results will happen of our efforts. We should never ever give up. And always make effort to be mu'mineen, to be believers, and to call people towards Islam. And I conclude by mentioning one last thing. Within the context of the genocide of our brothers and sisters in Gaza, I remember one person was mentioning a story, I was listening to a lecture about this, that he was mentioning, this is a person who was in Gaza at the time, at the height of the genocide, at the beginning stages, and there was a baker who basically was in Gaza, and he decided to leave his bakery open. And the people telling him, why are you leaving your bakery open? You're going to get killed. You're going to get killed. Why you have your bakery? He's like, this is all I have. And this is what I can do for the people of Gaza. So I'm going to do this. So Allahu Akbar. Never to give up. And the people of Gaza and the people of Palestine have shown us, despite the worst persecutions, the idea of being resilient. So this is the takeaway message. Never give up, and understand that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has promised the end is for the believers. But on one condition, which is, you have to be believers. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give us all the tawfiq to carry the message of Islam, to be true believers, and to be people who are patient in the face of difficulty. May He remove the suffering of our brothers and sisters who are oppressed all over the world, in Palestine, in China, in Burma, in Kashmir, in Sudan, and all over the world. اللهم اهدنا فيمن هديت وعافنا فيمن عافيت وتولنا فيمن توليت وبارك لنا فيما أعطيت وقنا شر ما قضيت فإنك تقضي ولا يقضى عليك إنه لا يذل من واليت ولا يعز من عاديت تباركت ربنا وتعاليت فلك الحمد على ما قضيت نستغفرك ونتوب إليك على ما أحسح على المسلمين في فلسطين وفي كل مكان يا ذا الجلال والإكرام آمين. عباد الله إن الله يأمر بالعدل والإحسان وإيتاء ذي القربى وينهى عن الفحشاء والمنكر والبغي يعظكم لعلكم تذكرون واذكروا الله العظيم يذكركم واشكروه ويزدكم واستغفروه ويغفر لكم واتقوه وجعلكم من أمركم مخرجا وأقيموا الصلاة.